let's move on now to the question of the features of plosives. You will recall that plosives are conveniently described in terms of 3 stages. Terminology varies, but I shall use the terms approach, hold, and release. Where by approach, I mean the moment as the articulators, the primary articulators of the plosive are approaching one another. By the hold, I mean the period during which they are in contact with one another and the airflow is therefore prevented from passing. And by release, I mean the process whereby they separate from one another, allowing the air to escape, and you get some sound associated with that. Now, if you think carefully about a word like happy, with a voiceless plosive between vowel sounds, I think a moment's reflection will show you that you can detect with your ears the approach, and you can detect with your ears the release. But you can never detect with your ears the hold, except by the presence of a silence. The hold consists of a silence. Happy. If I slow it down, happy. There, during the moment when the lips are together and the air is compressed behind them, you can hear nothing, because nothing is happening. Happy. Happy. So we have this slight paradox with plosives, that what you think of as the core of the plosive, if you look at the spectrogram, is a moment of silence. And the only way we can tell that it's a P and not say a C, that you're not saying hatty or hacky, is by what we hear during the quick moments as the articulators come together or as they separate. The onglide and the offglide. The transition at the end of the preceding vowel and the transition at the beginning of the following vowel. Nevertheless, although these approach and release stages are so very vital for the identification of which plosive it is, they are subject to considerable variation according to the context in which the sound is. So first of all, just let's consider various kinds of approach. If we take the words shown there on the handout, amber, under, anger, and we consider now the voice, the lenis plosives that they have, amber, voicing throughout, yes, voicing throughout here, no reason for any de-voicing, amber, amber, amber. But think about that B. Now, ordinary B, if we take the word Abbey, for example, voiced, what does it consist of? The articulatory movements involved are that the lips come together, stay together for a moment, and separate. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Does that apply with amber? Well, no, it doesn't, because the approach phase is going to be different. And that's because, obviously, it has to fit in with the M that precedes it. Now, make an M by bringing the lips together with the soft palate down. So, as we make the M, the lips are already in contact, but the soft palate is down, allowing the air to come out through the nose. How do we get from there to a B? Well, we can't bring the lips together because they are already together. So what we have to do, in fact, is to adjust the position of the soft palate. And to go from M to B, what you do is move the soft palate. Now, we don't have feeling in the soft palate like we do in our lips, so it's a bit difficult for me to ask you to feel that. But if you say the word to yourself, amber, 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 see if you get any sensation of the soft palate moving. If not, you have to take it on trust. There is one sort of slightly risky thing you can do. I hope you don't make yourself sick, but if you feel back with the tip of your tongue on the roof of the mouth as you're thinking of an M sound, make an M sound. Can you feel where it gets soft? That's the soft palate. Okay, now stop thinking of M and think of B, or actually saying amber, with your tongue contacting that soft palate, and you feel it flip on out of the way. Can you get that sensation of the room of the soft palate? If not, you'd have to have an X-ray taken and then you would actually see it moving. But believe me, that's what's happening. The soft palate moves, and that is the approach of the B in amber. The approach consists in the movement upwards of the soft palate, so that the air which has been streaming out of the nose during the M is suddenly cut off and blocked. And the condition for a plosive, of course, is that the air can't get out anyway. Vocal cords continue to vibrate, you have a moment of build-up of pressure, and then the lips separate in the normal way, so it's an ordinary release. So this is a special kind of approach, which naturally enough is known as nasal approach. And we get nasal approach whenever we have a plosive preceded by a homorganic nasal, and usually after any nasal. So this means that in under, the D has a nasal approach, same thing happens there, and in anger, the G has nasal approach. Now, again, it's obvious with the labials, because you can use your eyes, you can see, I don't make two separate labial gestures for the two labial consonants. I don't say amba. Nobody says amba. We run the two together, we use the same lip gesture for the two segments, amber. Amber. This appears to be a universal in human languages. Any language that admits the sequence of consonants of the type NB, NP, NB and so on, does this, uses the same gesture for the two of them. There doesn't seem to be any language that would require you to do amber. So that's fairly common sense. It is a kind of coarticulation, of course. It's a coarticulatory effect to get from one static position to the next, from the M configuration to the B configuration. You take the shortest possible route, which means not moving the lips, but moving the soft palate. Same, of course, applies if the plosive is voiceless, MP sequence, camp. How do you make it when you've got your lips together for the M, camp? What do you do to turn it into a P? You've got to keep the lips together, no change. Camp. But the soft palate rises, comes off the nasal escape, and the vocal folds, well, either spring apart or spring firmly together, depending on whether you preglottalize. But they will stop vibrating. The build up of pressure, camp, and then the lips separate, and then the air out again. Well, sorry to have done that in such detail, but I think if you understand the obvious type, nasal approach, it's easier to see what's happening in the case of nasal release, which we should come to in a minute, where everything is the same but the other way around. Before we do that, though, let's look at another special approach. That's lateral approach, which is what we get in LT and LD sequences in traditional RP. Now, I put in that little caveat because English is undergoing this sound change at present, whereby dark L is vocalizing, and this means that this changes or alters. But in the traditional pronunciation, the word like alter has got a lateral all followed by a plosive, both of them being alveolar in place, in builder, then a sequence of consonants. Now, again, this means that when you are on the L stage, all the tongue tip is already in contact with the alveolar ridge. Air is coming over the sides of the tongue in this case, it's a lateral. If you suck in with an L, you can feel the cold on both sides, telling you where the air is passing. Ooh. Now, again, to take the shortest route to get to the plosive, you don't move the tongue tip, because the tongue tip is already in the right place. What you move is the parts of the tongue that are not in the right place, which means the side ribbons. So they have to go sort of outwards and upwards to make a contact with the roof of the mouth, side teeth or whatever, preventing the air that was streaming out over the side from getting out. And again, then offering a complete blockage to the air. So again, a special approach, lateral approach, which involves moving not the primary articulator, the tongue tip, but the sides of the tongue. Do we have lateral approach with plosives at other places of articulation? Do we have lateral approach with P and B? What happens in a word like elbow or helping? Help. Do we have lateral approach now? Well, not on the definition that I've been giving, because they're not homorganic. You don't already have the primary articulator, or part of the primary articulator, in its place required for the plosive. Now, if we used bilabial laterals, then that would be the case. If you said help, that would be a real lateral approach, but we don't do that, of course. We don't have a bilabial lateral. The lateral is alveolar, so that doesn't actually help at all for making the bilabial plosive B. So I wouldn't call that lateral approach. Same with the V.